More than yields, farming with purpose. We're talking about a little bit bigger picture here and what it is we do for a living. It's a good time to be reflective and talk about what you really want to pass down. I've got Matt Miles and Brian Strider in this very special episode of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve.
It's XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve podcast, cutting your learning curve and improving your farming operation every week. This episode of the Cutting the Curve podcast is brought to you by BASF, creating innovation to help farmers do the biggest job on earth. And now, let's get ready to learn with your host, Damian Mason.
Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve. I got Brian Strider with a company called Holganix. Holganix is a company that we've been working with now for a couple of years at XtremeAg. In fact, Holganix just had our friend Matt Temple and Kevin in Washington, D.C. last week. That's right. Mucky mucks, I think, is the term that comes to mind when you think about Matt Miles. But Matt Miles is not just a mucky muck. He's also an Arkansas farmer. He also talks a little bit about legacy. If you've tuned into our stuff over the last 4 years of me interviewing him on his farm, at his field days, on our webinars, and on these Cutting the Curve podcasts, you'll know that Matt came back to the farm. His father died. Matt has a son, Lane, that works with him, 31-year-old man, and also got a couple of grandkids there, and also his daughter is married to a farmer. So legacy is very important. And what we're talking about here is the why behind the what. Okay, we know you got to make yield. We know you want to make big yields. We know that you want to make money, all that stuff. But then there's the other side of it. And then I think that's where some of these product lineups that we're talking about, we've overused synthetic nutrition. We've overused, in some cases, some chemistry is kind of harsh. We think we can do a better job, and frankly, we are doing a better job. So I guess the question I'd ask, and we just before we hit the record button, we're talking about how things are a little bit bleak right now in agriculture. Are you still excited about the future, Matt? You look out there, you drive into the farm this morning to the office, you still get excited about the next generation's opportunities?
Well, yes. You know, we talked about this earlier. I'm 56 years old, so I'm on my downhill slope of my career in farming. But, you know, and it is bleak. And there's a, you know, and your monkey on your shoulder would tell you, hey, you probably ought to get out. You probably ought to quit. You know, this thing's looking bad. To get that monkey off my shoulder, driving to the farm, looking at the sunrise, knowing that I'm going to go to work and spend the day with people that I love, my son, my wife. You know, we're a family operation. We work together. I say this a lot, when you work with the people you love, that's not really work. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, we get sweaty. Yeah, we bleed. I mean, I'm bloody from the picker from last night. But it's a heritage thing. Very few people get the opportunity to be that close working with their family. Now, some of them probably don't like it, but I'm fortunate that my family all gets along, and there's just not a better day than a day on the farm.
Yeah, it's and we've done this in the granary, in our granary show. And by the way, if you're listening to this or watching this and you haven't checked out our granary show, I encourage you to do so. Matt's been on a number of episodes. It's taped right here at my Indiana farm. We sit down, we invite you to pull up a chair and join the conversation. We talk about everything from the personal to the professional. You can find the granary show at XtremeAg.farm or at our YouTube channel. Go on YouTube, type in XtremeAg, and you can hit subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. We've got 40 episodes that have almost 40 episodes have been released with the granary show, so it's a really good time. You should check it out. From a personal standpoint, there's a professional standpoint, there's everything in between when we're talking about this topic, Mr. Strider. I think that ag people, there's every industry, there's folks that they do a shitty job. They don't care and all that. And then there's the types that really truly are in this because there's a legacy component to it, and legacy means sometimes leaving it better than when I got it. You know, I think that I enjoy talking to those people because they truly are looking at the soil, buying this crummy farm that was mistreated and then bringing it back to life, all that kind of stuff. I get excited about that. I feel like I've done a little bit of that myself here, to be honest with you. You put in drainage tile and drainage ditches and bringing in manure and doing what we can to grow the organic matter percentage and all that. I kind of like that topic. And I think there's more of that than the average person would realize.
Yeah, there is. You know, there's when you talk about the farm, you talk about legacy and you talk about family. There's something very satisfying about looking back on what you've done and leaving it better than what it started. And just like you said, I've got friends and neighbors that have got an old farm and have done improvements, and they're very proud of what they've done to their farm. And that leads into, I started with Holganix in 2023, use it on my farm. And I didn't want to start with the company until I saw what it was going to do for a farm, my farm, because in order to be able to look a farmer in the eye and say, this is what it does, I know what it can do, I wanted to feel comfortable with it. So with that journey, we've been able to get on other farms and help try to make those improvements, because as Matt said earlier, he's got blood behind him that's going to come in and run this farm. And we're making strides to make those farms better by, improving the soil. For years, we've unknowingly beat the hell out of our soil, doing the best we could with what the knowledge we had.
I want to go to that one, because that's one that I find it funny. You asked before we hit the record. So Matt and I are 56 years old, and you're a little younger than us. I bump into people, and I do this when I speak at events, and I bring this up. I said, when I'm around suburbanites, traveling, whatever, I just wish we could farm like the old days when it was all a bunch of small family farms instead of these corporate farms. I said, what do you think that looked like? And there's this belief that somehow it was more wholesome and we were better. I said, have you heard of a thing called the Dust Bowl? We plowed up 6 states so that they could blow into 2 others. I mean, this idea that we were more holistic and wholesome and pastoral 60 years ago is nonsense. It's not even true. Matt, are things being done in a more environmentally cognizant and environmentally aware factor in Deshay County than they were when you were born? I would think so.
100%, and that's where, I look up to companies like Holganix, and it's took the internet, because the farmer's not out there reading encyclopedia much, but he is getting on his phone. He is looking at, educational things. There's meetings you can go to. I know so much more about soil health today than my dad did at 56. He was doing his best, but they weren't the education we get today by companies like Holganix, and they're proving it. And farmers are so close-minded, especially the old dogs. And I say old dogs being the generation below me. Why, that ain't gonna work. The biggest mistake I ever make is saying, well, that ain't gonna work. That's a snake oil. And education has showed us. And if you don't believe it, try it. All you gotta do is try it. And if you got a 1,000-acre farm, don't go do 1,000 acres. Do 200.
Right.
Prove it to yourself. And then you'll be able to say, hey, I want this on 1,000 acres, and anything else I rent, I'm going to put it on too. Soil health is a real deal, and it's not a magic bullet where one product, Holganix is not going to fix everything that you have, but they're going to aid in the repair of your soil from years past when we haven't treated it quite like we treat it now. And the yields are there. It's been so cool this year. It's cost me money out of my pocket. But I rented a lot of extra land this year because some farmers didn't make it. And every farm that I rented was 20% less yield than the farms I've been farming for the last 10 years.
So it's hard to argue. There's going to be somebody that says, well, that's why those farms got given up. And that's why those guys couldn't make it, because they're lesser properties. And you're saying, no, they're fairly identical.
Better.
They're better properties. They've been not farmed as well.
They've been farmed as well. The attention hasn't been paid to soil health, organic matter, and different things like that. And, we said this before the podcast started. It may have been during the podcast. Slinging fertilizer out there, synthetic fertilizers, is not the answer.
No.
Holganix has got mounds of data. It opened my eyes some. Some of the guys that I talked to this past week, mounds of data where they're not using any fertilizer anymore. Now, I'd love to be in a state that had that black soil that I could do that, and I'm not. I've still got to aid mine with synthetic fertilizer, but I've reduced that by 10 to 20% on every different synthetic fertilizer I use. Now I've increased my micros because micros help aid in soil health too. But I have decreased these high amounts and thinking that sling nitrogen out there and that's going to make my corn better. That's not even close to the right answer.
Well, the other thing, and the point to that is, if y'all see the input prices is a big talking point to coming into 26. The fertilizer guys ain't going down. The price is not going down for whatever reason. You talk about slinging rocks, and you're right. It gets me. I just can't understand. They haven't improved a damn thing on fertilizer since Moby Dick was a minute. It's the same fertilizer as it was 70 years ago, but yet they keep raising the price, and it's done nothing different than what it's done for years, and actually it's hurt our soil because of all the synthetics we put in. And it's knocked our soil. I'm not knocking farmers. I'm not knocking the fertilizer industry. What I'm saying is the lack of knowledge that we had. We didn't know any better. Mm-hmm. We did with the best we could. But now, as we can make that soil better, we can make the biology better. We don't need as much because we'll let the soil go back to work for the farmer.
And I'm going to go ahead and knock the synthetic fertilizer industry because it's a mafia. They set the prices. They're way above what they should be. They completely control the market, just like drug dealers control the marijuana market.
Yep.
And it's been the same thing. It's the exact same analysis it was when they started digging it out of the ground.
Yeah.
And they don't, and the retailers don't promote. They sell fertilizer. So why would they promote soil health when it's going to reduce the amount of fertilizer you use?
Yep.
Look at the forest. I mean, you look at these forests, they're doing great. They ain't had no fertilizer on them.
Right.
Yeah. And the problem with retailers is as we keep moving forward into agriculture, it's not about the farmer anymore to them. It's about who's going to give them the best duck trip, or who's going to give them the best kickback on fertilizer or chemical or whatever, wizard piss they got in their jug that's going to get paid more. Point is Holganix does care about the farmer. We see it. And if without these farmers, the world's not going to be the way it is right now. It's going to get worse. And, you go back to what Damian's point about the picket fence and the holistic farm and all that. I never saw that in my 5 generations. It ain't that fancy. Never was. It was all hard work and sweat and get her done. And
Moby Dick as a minnow. Listen to this, Matt. From Moby Dick as a minnow to wizard piss. This guy, Brian Strider, is on. I mean, I thought the most poetic, the guy that was capable of writing the best prose out of Missouri was Mark Twain. I think right behind him is Brian Strider. You're
I want to write some of these things down because I'm going to use these next time I talk.
Go for it.
What the personal side of this thing is, we keep talking about soil and all that and the changes, but the other part of it, I think, when I look at this is you want it to be a business and a lifestyle, and it can be. I guess there's a perception that I see from, again, non-ag people that because now Matt Miles has a couple of dozen employees and has certain parts of it set up as an LLC, that still isn't a family business operation, which is not true. And so, I mean, it's as though there's a group think among suburbanites that every other business is supposed to evolve. Teslas versus Model A's, but agriculture is still supposed to be like it was I don't know. Somehow it's about 1950. I think that's about when
40
everybody thinks
acres
it's
and a
supposed to
mule.
be.
Let's call it 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's right. This is
And
the way.
it's not
I
going to be that way.
want to comment to that. 6207 Highway 65 North. That's my address in McGee, Arkansas. The suburbanites need to come spend a little time with us. They sit there and look on social media, the suburban mom does, at how we're trying to kill them with all these products. Come spend some time with me. Everybody's welcome. If they'll come spend a day on the farm, they will understand, yes, I'm a big farmer. I've been forced into being a big farmer. But if you take me and my son, you divide it by 2, I'm not that big of a farmer.
right. Right.
What about when you think about, Ryan, around your operation there? You think about the legacy part of it. What do you want it to look like?
In a perfect world, I can remember and I'll just tell you flat out, when my grandfather retired, my dad had to get his checkbook out, go to the bank, borrow money, buy him out, bought my great uncle out. I remember that. I mean, it was not given. When I started it'd be several years ago, I went to the bank, borrowed money, bought my mom and dad out. So in a perfect world, my legacy would be for my kids, with knowing now what I do know, is to make the transition a lot easier for them. I mean, listen, I appreciate my family and I appreciate them making me buy it, so I have a true appreciation for the farm. So I want my legacy to be the same, Damian, down to my kids. I've got family that I work with too, that are coming into the operation. They're young operators, and my legacy is to leave it better than I found it. And I have no complaints the way I found it, but I want it to be better.
We said we're going to call it more than yields farming with purpose. What's that mean to you, Matt? Because also, I think yields are very important. I mean, it's a business. And I run a show called The Business of Agriculture, so I have no problem saying this is a business. In fact, I sometimes bristle at this idea that, well, yeah, they don't make any money, but they're the way things are supposed to be. I said, what the hell does that mean? They got 24 cows out there. They don't really manage it like a herd. It's a hobby. If it's just a hobby, that's fine, but let's call it what it is. But if it's a business, it's a business. And I think that you've got to have a really nice job in town or your own business that you own to make this a hobby. I did the hobby beef thing for 13 years. Trust me, I know this. You treat it like a business, so I think that Nick, you've got a pretty good balance, Matt.
Well, yeah.
You run it as a business, and you also have a little bit more of a heartfelt angle on it too.
Yeah, there's a way to do both. You can't, you can go broke trying to save money. We have to have an ROI. Everything's got to produce. You can't be out here farming just because it gives you a fuzzy feeling in your body. But there are ways to do both. Kelly says this a lot of times. The sustainability path or the regen path and the high yield path converge. If you really look at what you're doing, you can make higher yields and protect your soil at the same time, and you can do that as a family farm.
And use less synthetics. Less tillage, less synthetics. You can do, and because we've got the tools, company like Holganix, we got better tools now than we did just a decade ago. There's still some some wizard piss out there.
Yeah, there is.
There was no Holganix back then. There were no biological companies. Now, granted, we've been flooded with biological companies. Hundreds of biological companies. They're selling everything from frozen bugs to stuff that don't work. There's no regulation on what they're doing. So I can see where a farmer would get very confused at what's going on. What do I buy? What do I not buy? What ROIs and what don't ROI? And that's where I said, you've got to try these products. For a long time, I was trying biologicals and they weren't working. 2-3 years. And I'm like, what in the world? This is supposed to be the greatest thing in the world. I was using city water, which was heavy chlorinated. The minute I was putting the biology in the tank, put the water in there, I was killing every bit of it. There's education, and companies like Holganix, you can't just go get their product and set it out here in a tote like you do Roundup and go back in 2 months and say, hey, I'm going to put this Holganix out, because it's real, it's living. There's certain ways you got to handle it. If you want the good stuff, you've got to be able to take a little bit more time, not hit the easy button, and protect that stuff and put it out right. And back to the family farm thing, everybody in here, just about in my whole operation, is kin in some way. Maybe not necessarily to me. I've got husband and wives that work together. I've got uncles and nephews. I've got landowners that work for me. I've got one landowner that quit his job and said he was going to work for me. And I said, well, I don't have a position. He said, well, you need to create one. I said, I don't have the money. He said, well, I'll work for free. So there's still family operations out here that are bigger just because you're bigger don't mean you need to get penalized as being a corporate farm.
Yeah, right.
You can be big and still be a family farm.
I've got several friends and family that farm anywhere from 10,000 to 30,000 acres. And I can walk into that office every day and see the owner, or get out and go on a pickup with the owner. And the owner makes a decision. So people have a vision of a corporate farm being big acres. Well, it's not. The difference between a corporate farm and a family farm to me is like a Farmers National or something like that, a group that manages. That's corporate. But I don't deal with any corporate farms. I don't know. I mean, you guys travel a lot. I deal with zero corporate farms.
Well, they might be like, obviously, at a certain point, if you're not set up as an LLC or as an S Corp or a C Corp, you're just being irresponsible because of the amount of assets and the liability and all those things. And I believe that some of our friends that listen to NPR hear this thing about corporate farms, like that could be. If I have 500 acres, I'm still going to be structured as some sort of a corporation just because of taxes, because of liability, because of the handoff ability. All of the for God's sakes, is your little dry cleaner down the road, are they also a corporation? You love going there and taking your shirts in. It doesn't mean that they're somehow evil. It just means that they had to set their company up a certain way.
They're covering their ass.
I've got 5 businesses besides a farm, and all of them are an LLC. It's for risk protection, it's for tax purposes, but we get lumped into that corporate farm. I've personally never seen a corporate farm. I don't even know what one looks like, where it's run by a board and one or two. I've never seen that. I don't know. I mean, where are they at, Damon? You've done a lot of
I guess you'd probably say some of the California, very large scale specialty produce might fit more of that model. And then obviously there's those that would call Tyson a corporate farm because they do own chickens and vertically integrated, and then employ farmers to man the chicken houses for them. So maybe that's where that connotation would come in. I guess the other part of this is when you think about the care. I know that there's this perception also that small operators care more about their soil, care more about natural resources, and large operators don't. And I would say this is patently false. I'll give you an example. The guy chopping silage behind my house right now is a dairyman, and he's got 3,200 to 3,400 milking cows between 3 facilities, which is obviously very large compared to a dairy farm of my era growing up. I can tell you that when I drive through his cow barns, those cows are in better condition than any cow that was on our farm growing up. It's not because we were mean or abusive. It's just because they have veterinary visits once a week, protocols put in place, a hired nutrition consultant that makes sure that the rations are amazingly done, just prescribed nutrition, if you will. Fresh water every about 100 feet in those barns, fans blowing on them, sand cleaners for their bedding. The idea that somehow big means they do a lesser job of caring for the resource is just absolutely false. And so Matt might, knock out 12,000 acres. It doesn't mean that he's mistreating the 12,000 acres just because he's got a lot of acres. And I think that that's something that there's a big misperception about.
There is a big perception because the growers that I work with that are neighbors and friends, they're looking at everything, and they pay more attention to, and I can tell you this as a farmer, Matt, I don't know where you're at on this, but the most expensive part of a farm operation is a tractor and a damn shredder. And mowing roadsides and keeping things nice and doing the right things. I don't know of any farmer likes to do it, but we all do it. But the point is we take care of the land, take care of the farms, and big, small, all around, I see people taking care of things. And, there was only one farm family that I've ever seen in my entire life that's an hour north of me that has a show, and they're whatever. They're the worst I've ever seen. Ever.
I have seen it, by the way. I always gripe about the people in the Red River Valley in North Dakota. They're massively big potato producers, and as soon as they get done harvesting, they go out there and they cultivate that up. So then all winter long, you can see the beautiful black dirt blowing onto the snow. So I know that some larger scale, they still do a tremendous amount of tillage, which is bad for the ground. They probably still do sling too many synthetic fertility rock products out there. But I'm just saying that's not always the case. In fact, many times it's not the case.
Right. No, there's a lot of tillage, recreational tillage now, what I call it, because if you get your soil right and you get your biology right in your soil, you don't have to do that as much.
Well,
all right, so
some instances where we're at with the furrow irrigation, we have to do a certain amount of tillage.
Yep.
Because we have to get that water from the top end of the field to the bottom.
Yep.
Or our bean yields will go from 80 to 20.
Right.
My highland bean yield this year is probably going to be about 22 bushel. My irrigated bean yield is going to be about 75 to 80. So we have to irrigate or we're not going to be in business. And you have to be able to get that water path to go through. So one size don't fit all.
Right.
There's got to be some tillage in certain areas, but you can still, I've benefited by reduced tillage by doing, when I can get everything right, I can no-till some. I've got 1,100 acre rice farm that hadn't been tilled in, I don't know, 4 years probably, hadn't had a tillage application on it. I don't have to water that for irrigation, so I can do that in a different way. But there is guys out there doing mass tillage, and tillage is not good for your soil. Anytime you can reduce tillage, you're going to increase your biology, no question. But there is certain situations, I've been to some meetings where if you till, in the Holganix meeting, some of those guys in there were just like, I want to slump down in my seat, like, yet I have to till some, because they were like, if you till, you're going to hell. Well,
yeah.
There's certain situations, and I brought that up, where in certain areas you have to do a little bit of tillage, but it's just like reduction of fertilizer. I'm not totally zero fertilizer now,
right?
But I reduced it by 20%.
Right.
Tillage. I used to be 100% tillage. I'm probably 40 to 60% minimum till. Some of it's no till. So there's still ways to improve, even though you can't be 100% no till.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And heck, on my farm, I've got vertical till. I mean, I hit a couple inches, stir it a little bit. I don't go any more than 6 inches, which pretty much we call tillage.
Yeah.
So there's no, just like to Matt's point, there's no magic bullet. There's no product that fixes every acre on every farm. But just like you're saying, you're doing less tillage than you were in the past. But when you do that, when you're doing your irrigation on your beans, you're getting a lot of daggum compaction, and you have to get that stuff stirred up and have to figure out a way to get that water to percolate through the soil. And it's a process. There's no magic bullet. It's a process.
But if we're calling tillage deeper than 6 inches, I'm 80% no-till, maybe 90%.
Yeah.
By the way,
Minimum to no-till.
Brian, that's just something Brian came up with. It's right up there with this Moby Dick thing. He just made that up. If somehow it doesn't count as tillage until it goes 6 inches, he's just made that up. Anyway,
Now, I will say this: 6 inches to me is about like that.
There you go.
Yeah,
So,
right.
and the reason for the 6 inches, Damien, is because there's a web of fungi below the soil, and it works its way down. But if you tear that up, then your web of goodness is gone.
Yeah.
So that's where we get with the, and it's just like it's a tomato, just like Matt said, hell, somebody 6 inches could be this, somebody 6 inches could be, that's the thing.
All right, so we're getting on the verge of PG-13 here. The legacy part of it. All right, more than yields, farming with purpose. What's farming with purpose mean? Brian, you go first. I think that you already said you want to make sure that there's the family aspect of it. I think there's that. Leaving things better than I took them on, although you didn't leave it. You didn't take it on anything poorly. What else is purpose?
The legacy to me is also when a farm thrives, a community thrives. And what I mean by that is the better we can make our farms successful, the better we make our communities. And to me, what I would like a legacy to be for me is to have an awesome farm, B, to help the family, and C, to help our communities. So just build it from the bottom up.
Matt?
Yeah, well, Brian's about got me in tears because, we all say the same song and dance. We want to leave it better than,
yeah.
We want to have whatever. But when he hit a nerve there, not a nerve, but an emotional nerve when he's talking about the community. My daughter just did a article. She's 34. They farm. They're in trouble. And she just did an article, which is going to be the cover for Delta Farm Press, I think, in October. And it was about, we probably got 20 or 30 young farmers that's come back to this county because to try to build a community. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Brown said it as well as anything. If you're in an ag community and ag doesn't work, then the community don't work. You're going to lose teachers. You're going to lose hospitals. You're going to lose your doctors, your lawyers, your Walmart, which I'm not Walmart, maybe your mainstream mom and pop stores.
Yep.
If the farm's successful, the community's successful, just like he said, that's a perfect way to put it. You couldn't write that down in a poem any better than what Brian said. And that just hit home because she did that article and sent me a copy of it yesterday. And it's happening. And if we don't, and we're tied sometimes to how good our farm can be by what the government does with our commodities, And so you put all those pieces of pizza together, and I don't have a comment. What Brian said works for if that don't work for everybody that farms, then they don't need to be farming.
Mm-hmm. I'll leave it right there. I think that's probably an accurate statement. Thank you, Brian. Way to wrap it up. You didn't start off so good, but you sure came around at the end. Once you got your little Moby Dick minnow things going, then it worked out great. All right, his name's Brian Strader. He's a company called Holganix. He's joined by our friend Matt Miles. Matt Miles was actually in our nation's capital with Holganix just last week, talking about the situation in agriculture in the United States of America. When you talk about farming and more than yields and farming with purpose, let's talk about farming in the future, and that's what they were talking about. If you want to learn more about Holganix, Brian, where do they go?
You got to get online, look up Holganix.com, and we can steer you to where you need to be. I'm in Missouri. We've got guys in Texas, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Kansas. We're all over the place. Arkansas. I'm going to come down and see Matt. I got to bring some shirts.
Yeah. All right. The company's called Holganix, Holganix, Holganix. He's named Brian Strider. He's joined by Matt Miles. Remember, if you like this, share it with somebody that can benefit from it. We talk about a lot of different things here. We've been putting these episodes out for more than 4 years now. Hundreds of episodes of Cutting the Curve, also hundreds and hundreds of videos these guys shoot on their farms to help you farm better. And then we've also got our shortcuts, and we have our granary show. Not to mention, if you want to take your learning to the next level, become an XtremeAg member for just $750 a year. You get access to technical information, you get year-end data results, you get special offers from our business partners. Go to XtremeAg.farm to learn more about that. Till next time, thanks for being here. I'm Damian Mason with XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cutting the Curve. Make sure to check out XtremeAg.farm for more great content to help you squeeze more profit out of your farming operation. This episode of the Cutting the Curve podcast is brought to you by BASF, creating innovation to help farmers do the biggest job on earth.